All right, I am recording live with Mr. Adrian Courage. And today we decided to bring up everyone's favorite topic, the devil himself. And
The devil himself.
yeah, and figure out if he exists or if we should care if he exists and how so or how not so. And we may get into a few other things because Adrian and I are reading a lot of the same books, so and talking about some of the same topics. So without much further ado, this is, I don't know, Adrian's third or fourth time on here. Some of them have gone really long, but Adrian, why don't you give us a brief introduction of yourself and a brief catch up on what's up with you, and then we'll get into stuff.
All right. Adrian Courage. Courage is my real name.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting synchronicity, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I've had not a run-in with the devil so much, but I've recently discovered I was bipolar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, bipolar 1. And the way you discover that is you have a manic episode.
So you had your first one?
I had my first one age 44, which luckily I went upwards. Well, that's the manic episode is thinking you're Jesus or God, or it's your job to save the world, basically. And when it's your job to save the world, that can spiral out of control, or it does spiral out of control, and you end up doing all kinds of embarrassing things like running through the streets naked and that kind of stuff. Totally losing track of reality. Luckily, no one got hurt, and I got to the hospital in good time before I did anything really, really stupid. But one of the things I got into was during that time was conspiracy theories.
Air quotes theories for those who don't have the video.
Yeah, air quotes.
Because they might be conspiracy realities. Who knows?
Well, there is a history of conspiracies.
Yeah, there are.
In the history of the world.
For all of history, there's definitely some conspiracies. It's just a matter of which ones are theories and which ones are realities. And sometimes we don't know until it's too late, or we never know. And anyway.
Right, exactly. So I got into the whole Q story.
Oh, really? Okay. I never got into that. Am I missing out by not getting into it?
It's a cool story, and I always thought that about all the conspiracies, is they're great stories.
Right.
The Titanic.
That's why they work.
That's why they definitely capture people's imagination.
Right.
My question is really, this demon got a hold of me in one sense, but it was a good demon. But I imagine people, I wanted to do good in the world. Right? That was my trip, and all these things I can say it was just the illness got hold of me. But
and this was pretty much all in the last, I don't know, few weeks or months since we talked last time.
Yeah. It started on like January 18th.
Oh, okay.
Up in hospital. So like beginning of the year. So from about January 10th, I started to go off the rail.
And we are recording this on March 4th for those who are listening in the future. But go ahead.
Right. So it's been a bit of a strange experience, really, to have this, find out that you're ill, and then work back and wonder when it started, when I started being ill, when I lost control of my faculties or my ability or my sense of reality. When did that actually happen? Because I've been writing a book for the last 2 years, and I read back some of my rantings of a madman from, nearly 2 years ago now. And all made me wonder well, maybe wonder, but things like Nietzsche, for example,
Right.
God is dead, I essentially made the proclamation of his madman who went into the square and said, hey guys, God is dead and we've killed him and we need to bring him back. And there you are with your godly background, you see.
Right.
So
Hmm.
then I see you pensive thinking.
Oh,
And then
my
I
pens.
thought, like,
Yeah.
who got in my way? And then
Mm.
the idea of the Antichrist
Mm-hmm.
came looming into view. I don't know if that's coming looming into your
Mm-hmm.
view at present, but
Right.
it's all a level of different levels of madness, essentially, which I've experienced and wanted to talk about basically with someone who might have read around these
That's a lot of
topics.
stuff. Okay,
That is a
so
lot.
okay, because one of the things that I mentioned, I don't know, a few times here is that I don't know what you would call it, maybe mental health or maybe being a good place or something like that is it's always it always has layers. So in other words, there's the biological layer. So there may be a biological element that some people are more prone toward bipolar disorder, for example. And then, but on the
Yeah,
other hand, some
my
people,
father had it.
okay. And then on the other hand, people may be completely, no mental health disorders, but you can be a little out of your mind sometimes, just even regular people, just from not enough sleep, not enough, eating,
Yeah,
just off balance diet. Um, and then what goes on in the female body on every level, all those things that kind of like can turn a person's reality, and not just in a female body, but then also in the guy's body, just having these higher levels of testosterone and a annoyingly high proclivity toward wanting to do sexual intercourse, these kind of things, they are on the biological level, but then there's also the internal mental state, or how that we have our sort of inner psyche organized or messed around or whatever. A lot of that has to do with beliefs and complexes and a number of other things along those lines. And then the other, I mean, there's more that you can get into these kind of layers, but then the other is simply the, I don't know if you'd call it the social environment or the outer world in terms of, does a person have friends? Do they have hobbies? Do they have a job? Do they have something that they're
right.
doing productive? That kind of thing. And so sometimes people want to focus on one or two of those areas. And again, there's other areas you could add on to it, but at least those are like the three basic areas. Like on the internal, you could say some of it's mental, some of it's spiritual, some of it's emotional, existential, things like that. And then the external level, there's all these elements of it. So those are the three main areas. And then the thing, like we kind of mentioned for a minute with conspiracy air quotes theories, is the concept that with all of these internal and external and everything else, reality is a tricky thing, and
Yeah,
we
definitely.
have to figure out how to operate in it, because we can never have like a full grasp of reality. We just kind of figure out how to have enough of a grasp of reality to kind of do our best or do our purpose. So yeah, and it sounds like with what you were going through, and plus I think everyone has, like, even though we might try to act tough or like we have it together or whatever, even the person who might most have it quote unquote together in these pandemic epidemic times or whatever, even like the most person quote unquote having it together can't, just because even if you do, everyone around you that you're connected with, most of them do not, just because people can't do what they normally want to. So that's the other element too, is like, even if you're a person, for example, who has all of those things together, your inner state, your social environment, and your biological state, that's great. But what's tricky sometimes is then, though, if like your work environment is completely out of whack, or your family environment and all these things, then you can only do so much. So that's the complexities of the human mind, kind of like to start.
This is an illness that I'm taking medication now.
Yeah.
And apparently they say it can be treated. I have to take medication for the rest of my life to stop this happening again, but it's very treatable. So it's very well defined and very treatable, which surprised me that these different mental illnesses can be compartmentalized so well with different medications.
Well, since you bring that up, and thank you for being transparent with your situation, but one thing that comes to mind is those I know who have or don't know them very well, but those who I've heard who have had this disorder or similar disorders, they have controversial opinions about the medication, particularly I think lithium, which is what you were given. Like Kanye West is famous for saying this. I think, I don't know if he specifically said lithium, because he doesn't always want to be fully transparent. But basically, he does not medicate, and he's kind of like an example, especially if you listen to some of his more recent interviews in the last couple of years or things, where he sounds just like what you're talking about. He's going to save the world or whatever, whatever he's doing,
and just talking a mile a minute and not making sense.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of it's good. Like I think it's only on YouTube from last November or whatever, a few days after he did that Joe Rogan interview, and I talked about it for a few minutes, and just that a lot of it's good because in him being sort of managed and in a not dangerous situation, he is able to have those deeper creative thoughts that maybe otherwise people wouldn't have or be able to talk about. And some of the things that he talked about, a lot of times people just don't talk about them when maybe they should or they would want to. So there's that element to it.
Well, that's why I had a sense of have to have full disclosure, and so I took my clothes off and went out into the street. So that's a funny story now, but you shouldn't take all your clothes off and run out in the street.
Yeah, public service announcement, boys and girls, don't try that at home.
Exactly. So,
no. But basically, one of the things that he was saying, and I know some others have said similar things, especially if they are trying to be the creative types, is that when they get on the medication, it takes away that creative edge that gives them what they have. So I don't know, what's your opinion on that now, having that experience?
My opinion is I've written most of a book in that state.
Okay.
And now I'm editing it, basically, and I'm editing it sober, so to speak. So as Hemingway said, write drunk, edit sober.
Right.
So it's actually worked out quite well for me. Like it was meant to happen this way. So I'm just editing it sober now, and I'm not too bothered. I don't feel like I've changed too much. I can have a good day or a bad day. It's not a matter of feeling
Yeah.
I never had that sense of having a writer's block, and that was a big pressure on me.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't feel that different, to be honest.
Yeah, it does kind of remind me of Nietzsche. Like Jordan Peterson often talks about how you know, Nietzsche had this super high IQ and he's super smart and all this stuff, which is true. I mean, he was a university professor when he was like age 24, which is in the Department of Philology at I think it was the Basel University in Switzerland. But he was really smart, but also some of the things that he wrote, which were all very profound for the most part, were it wasn't exactly like a academic feat or a feat of intelligence. It was more of like locking on to spiritual principles or archetypal energies or flowing from the, you know, the universal
It
psyche.
was
Or
art, wasn't it?
what
His
was
work
that?
was his work was art, essentially.
Um, yeah,
And
but
also critiques of other philosophers.
yeah, it's just, yeah, it does remind me of like people on like a manic episode kind of thing, and that's why it was very um controversial, especially for a long time, when it's like, you know, people didn't know what to make of that kind of thing, and he barely sold copies until I think, I mean, he sold a few, but only like in large amounts decades after his death. Um, but that's because people didn't really get what that type of work was getting at, and really it took a lot of people getting it wrong, and a lot of people at
This
least,
is before the wars. So 18.
well, and yeah, and that's why that they eventually kind of gained a lot of credibility, and that's what like Jordan Peterson gives them a lot of credit for too, is that he sort of predicted a lot of like what you talked about, the whole like death of God is going to lead to, you know, death of potentially almost everyone, or could be everyone, or death of the known
Exactly.
world kind
Yeah.
of thing. Yeah. So it's very similar in that way. And but although he maybe didn't have the sober editing, like when Carl Jung was critiquing him, uh, you know, a few years later, well, probably in the 30s, 1930s, you know, he made the point that so much of it was so grandiose that he would have been better off to not publish it, you know, just, or maybe publish part of it and edit it down. Like, because Carl Jung did a lot of the same stuff, was that he had a lot of those same grandiose type things, but he didn't publish them, at least in his lifetime. But he took that as personal inspiration to edit down and make more
Yeah.
refined academic type things. So yeah, it's like, wow.
We don't know if Nietzsche was bipolar, right?
Yeah, and
how he lost his mind, people say, was syphilis.
that might be part of how that he, what do you call it? There were a couple suspected brain disorders that he
Your
seems
audio
to
is
have had.
confusing.
Yeah, it was some genetic brain disorder that eventually led to the loss of his mind and life when he was, I don't know, and I think he was in his early 40s.
Yeah.
So yeah, but he kind of, the interesting thing that happened with him, and this might kind of get into some of the topic that we want to talk about, is he looked at what was falling apart around him, which was, you know, sometimes we talk about God and religion and politics and all these things. And for thousands of years, there would be a religion that would tie together each culture or civilization or whatever. And that would kind of be the overarching thing. Now, it would be varying levels that each person would say, okay, I really believe in this, or I really have total faith in it. They didn't really know. But they had these overarching narratives that would give each society their like codified
Identity.
ethic, yeah, and identity, especially in terms of values and morality. And so since the modern era, when it's like sometimes we can be like, oh, but um the church is still there and God's still there. Yes, but at the top of society, which is mainly those in the universities and political positions, they're no longer using, you know, religion as their codifying ethic. And that's not something that we maybe necessarily should do, but because that stopped being the case as it was for at least tens of thousands of years, although this happened, a lot of people made this point too, that the death of God has happened a few times, like in probably the most notable is partly in Egypt, although that happened a couple times because they have a huge history of 5,000 plus years, but then partly in Greece, where this was the time of Socrates and Plato, where they lost their faith in the Greek gods, and so they were having their own sort of chaos. But every time that there is a death of the gods, they eventually revive and revivify in just a little bit different way. And so now we're probably experiencing that.
Now we're getting to the territory of Ion. Sorry.
Yeah.
Jung's idea that we're coming to the end of an age, an Ion.
Well, and even if you don't believe, even if a person doesn't believe the astrological element to that and whatever else, which we're not astrologers, but there may be some synchronistic analogous things there that there was
you said at the end of the age of Christ, right?
Right, the Piscean age, which is this fish age, I guess, and then we're going to
two fish.
Well, and I was just reading the books in the other room, but it's the Grail Legend by Emma Jung and Marie-Louise von Franz. Grail, like the Holy Grail. Yeah. So this is a short thing from the Grail Legend by Carl Jung's wife that she spent 30 years on before her death, and then she passed on that responsibility to Marie-Louise von Franz. But they made the point in this book that said Carl Jung explained in Ion, Christian symbolism not only emerged from a psychic problem of opposites, but this problem also characterized its further development, as is already implied in Christ's reference to the coming of an antichrist, quote unquote. This problem of opposites is emphasized by the psychonistic fact of Christ, or the Christian aeon is distinguished astrologically by two fishes opposing each other. So yeah, that's like just what you were talking about. And it's interesting that they say synchronistically that those were and synchronistic, it's like it's a tough thing to get at, or a tough subject that that we'll probably wrestle with for a long time. But
synchronicity, you can't really talk about synchronicity. It just happens.
Yeah, but
you can't really. I can give you examples of my own synchronicities,
sure,
or things I've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And you have your own times, I'm sure, when something happens that you can't believe has happened at that moment,
right?
In those circumstances. But to talk about it is a bit like saying, does God exist? It's like, if you ask people, do you think everything happens for a reason? They will say, a lot of people will say yes. And they will say yes because they think that's a nice idea, right? Everything that's happened to you in the past has happened for a reason.
Right. It's going somewhere. Has a
It's
point.
going somewhere. But if you believe that, you're essentially saying you believe in God or something similar.
Yeah, more or less.
So it's like, take it or leave it. Either you believe in synchronicity or you don't.
This is a good example of what we were talking about a minute ago, that the sort of death of God that we've experienced in the last few hundred years or so, at least since the 1800s or so, that has been one that we're now trying to figure out what the revivification of that is, or the new gods. And some of that is...
But first you need to deal with the question of the Antichrist, right? Because we have Christ, we know Christ very well, and Christ played a key role in the forming of the world's societies, civilization.
Yeah, although
largely for the best.
Yeah, although you can almost look at it the opposite way too, whether you call it Antichrist or devil or whatever. In that, if you look at all religions throughout all time, they all have some kind of a devil figure. They'll differ on what kind of God or savior or Christ type of figure that they might have, but their devil figure is always very similar. And so since we've always had some kind of a devil or anti-savior sort of figure in just pretty much every culture throughout time.
Do we still have it? This is my question.
We do, but it constantly, just like God or the gods or whatever, it constantly changes form.
We do, but we have it in horror films or certain rituals of the Catholic Church.
Well, okay, so I guess if you're talking about like in cultures before, they would have an agreed upon sort of, this is what the devil is, so to speak.
Right.
And there may be some of that in certain cultures or subcultures, and there may be things that you see that in literary situations and such. But ultimately, the reason that any of that works throughout art, literature, or religion, spirituality, anything like that, is and these go way back to serious literary works and serious
well, there's Faust.
There's the Faustian drama. There's Dante, which I don't know if did you get into chapter 3 of Trauma in the Soul?
I listened to it. Yeah.
Okay, so there's the Faustian drama. There's Dante, which really gets well into these ideas. But the idea there and with all of these is that ultimately the reason that all of these work is because it's something inside each one of us, and
right.
and how that flows out. And so sometimes they call that the collective shadow, or the shadow of God, or the opposite of God.
Do you not think the collective shadow is very, very benign in its current form? So what I'm saying is stuff we talked about, like, it's not even clear that it is a shadow. It's not really violent. Let's say Black Lives Matter or something like this. Is that it's a manifestation of the shadow of people's insecurity, of, to some degree, there's the aspect of racism that's definitely a shadow, a manifestation of the shadow if people are actually racist. But it's all, let's get rid of Dr. Seuss or whatever outrage issue is happening today. I mean, these are such minor issues compared to the
Well,
massive struggles that have been going
so
on through
this is
time.
the thing about the devil, or whatever that you might say that is, whether it's in a religious or psychological or a literary thing, is
What I'm
that
saying is, sorry, just to clarify that there's the issues of today are very, very trivial compared to what people had to contend with, for centuries and on end. Sorry, I
no,
just wanted to be clear
yeah,
on
it's
my
fine.
point.
It's just tricky because yes and no. Yes, because we're not dealing with slaughtering of millions of innocent people like maybe we were even just decades ago. Um, but
But it still goes on in Yemen and other places.
yeah, well, I mean, and I don't ever. We should never be in a world where like the devil is only that which kills innocent people, because that's just one obvious manifestation. So, but the thing that makes the devil and him only able to work as such is almost like what you're talking about now, in that it's hard to identify. So in other words, if something were to come out and be like, I'm the devil, then everybody like get away from that devil, almost like they do with racist and cancel culture. Those are like witch hunters. They're like, let's find the evil thing, just like they were when they were like,
Okay,
burning witches at the stake and
really,
everything.
my question is, because
Mm.
you can talk about the devil as a kind of archetypal figure, right? But the question is there evil, pure evil? Like, how do you define that? If you say
In general, or you mean in like our contemporary, modern, postmodern world?
yeah, let's say the contemporary postmodern world.
Well, okay. We should probably mention the chapter that I want to maybe next time we'll prepare more and do, or sometime in the next few weeks or so, we'll really get into this chapter in more detail that we talked about
Yeah.
a little bit. But Dante, and this is a little bit, I don't have it in front of me right now. I actually finally got the book. It's expensive, and I wasn't sure why. Like, I didn't know if it was a college textbook, but it's actually just because it has a lot of color images. It has a lot of color images, is why it's like $60 for the book. But anyway, so it's called Trauma in the Soul by Donald Kalsched, who's like one of the primary modern or contemporary Jungian analysis. Anyway, so he makes the point that, okay, inside of every individual person, there's what he calls, I believe, the care management system, or self-care system. And so what that does is, throughout our life, from being born until we die, our life is full of trauma. And of course, some is very much more traumatic than others. And as that we go through traumas, some relatively we might think of as insignificant, and some is as simple as having a mother that wasn't very involved when we were infants or whatever. Which that's actually, I don't think you got to that chapter, but the last chapter is the one that I really like too, because he got into sort of like a psychoanalysis of Carl Jung. And what he did is he kind of like cross-referenced or like compared it to some people who just like non-Jungians who like just were saying Carl Jung was a crazy person, and he kind of like dissected why that was wrong and that type of thing. And then he went into really in depth of like what the whole issue was with Carl Jung, and made a lot of things make sense. But basically what happens is we get life is full of trauma, or we might just call it suffering. And the self-care system, which worked better maybe in our evolutionary past when we're just, running through the forest, hunters, gatherers, and maybe primitive farmers and all this. We would, and even up to now, we go through a hard event, and then we isolate our sort of conscious selves or ego selves from that sort of feeling. And over time, that creates more and more what they call complexes, and it also causes more and more disassociation, which is something tricky to talk about, because sometimes, like I even talked about it with a little bit with Eric Chung in the last podcast I published on the ego, where disassociation is, sometimes we just think about it in the mental health disorder of dissociative identity disorder. And it's not necessarily that. It's like everybody disassociates sometimes. Like sometimes it's like just when we procrastinate or we put off responsibilities, like, or, things like that in our day-to-day life, we disassociate. But some of it is more severe than others. Anyway, so in Dante's Inferno, when he got down to the devil, he didn't call him Lucifer. He didn't call him Satan or Beelzebub. He called him Dis, which is this Latin for basically where we get, it's like a root word for disassociation, or all this like, dismemberment, division, and all this. So anyway, the devil, in its pure, like, sneaky shadow, you don't realize it's their form, is the unconscious, constantly causing disassociation. And it actually starts out as a benevolent figure, or an inner figure trying to help. Yeah. But then over time, it almost is like how that a good mother, originally being maybe overprotective, seems like a good thing, but then becomes the devouring mother if that mother figure doesn't let the young person ultimately grow up as they become an adult, and they become constantly overly protective. Then that good mother, doing essentially the same thing, becomes the devouring mother. It's very, and that's very similar or analogous to how that this dissociative tendency in the center of each person starts off good, to isolate ourselves from pain or suffering or trauma, but then we become so isolated that we don't mature and grow up. And this gets into, I think, a lot of how that we and we use so many things to help do this, even in our politics or religion and all these things, to help isolate from the trauma of life. And then this is later what causes that snap in like the midlife journey. And it's tough because, like, maybe you experience some of this personally, of like the sort of like midlife crisis, but then I think sometimes what'll happen is a person might put off that snap, that sort of like midlife crisis, from being in like their mid 30s until they get into sometime in their mid 40s or even mid 50s. And then it becomes more dramatic or more problematic. So I don't know. Because yeah, you get super isolated, and it's because you built up this sort of false reality or a workable reality to protect from the trauma of life, and then that'll snap at some point. But it is, and then the only way to overcome that, and some of this is kind of expounding on this chapter 3 of Trauma in the Soul, but the only way to overcome that, I believe, is to it's almost like a Christ act, or a mimicking of Christ, in that you and maybe we have to sort of embody or mimic the Christ figure, something like that. But you face that disassociative principle in yourself until it disassociates, and it's a dangerous thing. And this is why I think it's good that we bring it up in light of what you've gone through recently, and that it if you let it disassociate everything, this is similar to what Nietzsche did, then you can start to rebuild your reality into like a better reality than you ever would have had otherwise. So it's like you let everything get disassociated completely till there's nothing left. It's almost like descending into Hades or hell. And then after that sort of like everything's been dismembered and dissociated instead of running from it. And it's a dangerous thing because some people try to do that and lose their mind. So it's not necessarily something
I went on heavy medication. They sedated me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt for days I couldn't speak.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have any thoughts.
Okay.
Essentially.
Right.
And it was a bit of this brought me back to reality, essentially, by sedating me. Because I was out of touch with the reality completely.
Yeah.
So it went on for about a week.
And then, did you feel like
being disassociated was real?
Right.
The position I held was contrary to everyone else in the world.
Right.
So I couldn't socially, I made friends with a tramp, a hobo, and he was my only friend, kind of thing.
Wow.
That was how bad it got. I mean, bad or good or whatever. It was, just happened that I can't really judge it as a thing that happened to me. I mean, it's something that happened to me. I stopped controlling what I was doing. I lost control of myself and I lost touch with reality. But I remember all of it. It's like when you're drunk or on drugs or something.
Right.
When you kind of remember what you were doing, but you can say in the cold light of day in the morning, you say that was just the booze talking.
Yeah. So do you feel like you went through that whole experience the last few months has been something that just caused, like, because that's what it sounded like to me when you described it a little bit before. It's like, and even now, like a total disassociation, and now you're able to rebuild reality in maybe a more real and in touch and genuine way than maybe what you had before.
Yeah, definitely. It's not an experience that I feel was a waste of time. Let's say, put it that way.
Yeah, well, it's a unique experience. It's kind of the kind of thing where it's a real adventure, and again, it's like we don't necessarily recommend anyone try it at home, but if you do go through it for whatever reason, it's
no, I mean,
it's a real adventure.
Like hear about it or read about it,
right,
and I expect them to feel some sympathy and some shock or whatever, surprise.
Right.
Well, they what I tend to find is actually Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club.
Yeah, Chuck Palahniuk.
Yeah, he went on Joe Rogan or someone, and he said the thing is he tells these pretty graphic stories. He said he had these kind of shows that he did where he would tell graphic stories, and people would come up to him after the show and tell him stories of their own that they haven't told anyone. They've been sitting on for 40 years and not told anyone. And because he told the story, they were inspired to tell their own stories. So that's how I feel about telling you or telling anyone or writing it down, especially.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if
that's an act of dissociation.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk about it, but I think it's
ask me anything.
Oh no. I just think that it's a good it's good for you, and these almost everything that people are maybe ashamed of and that they don't talk about, it's healing to talk about it. I mean, especially of course in a therapeutic setting, but the more that I think a person does so for others to hear and to just like put out there, it should be a healing thing.
Yeah,
But
I think that's really
yeah,
important in today's world. You know, we
mm,
live in a social media world
yeah,
where you can publish whatever you want,
right,
mostly, I mean, within reason.
yeah,
You can publish pictures on Instagram.
right,
You can have interactions on Facebook. We met on Facebook,
yeah, yeah,
but are people being honest? That's the big question, right?
right,
Is what people are publishing, is that
mm,
honest and helpful to others? And I don't really think it is. I mean, your group is,
mm,
but if you go over to
most other
the
groups,
the young groups,
mm,
I'm shocked by the level of discourse in there. Is everyone's just theorizing about other people. People aren't publishing
yeah,
their own selves, you know,
right,
their own experiences, their own experiences with patients, or their
right,
own experience as patients, or what got them interested in the first place, or anything like that.
yeah, or
Is
even like what I found really helpful when I kind of got into it a year or two ago is to just like make correlations, even just like between maybe certain, you know, even Nietzsche and Jung or Jordan Peterson or some of these other writers, Joseph Campbell, and to kind of like put them together correlated to like bring out a sort of meta point. And
yeah,
that's what I would often get like in trouble for, even kicked out of some groups. You know, when it's like, I almost get their point, but they're just not applying themselves at
not
all.
really
That
honest. They're not really honest.
Yeah, well, it's like a lot of them with the groups. It's like we're just here to talk about whatever, Carl Jung, Jordan Peterson, Nietzsche, whatever. And then if you at all talk about anything else, then I kind of get that, but at the same time, anybody can go on, you know, search Google, because in my mind, the main thing that things like these social groups, like a Facebook group, is good for is getting things out of the world that you can't get just by Googling or, you know, pulling up some
Right.
videos on YouTube or whatever. So you can Google Carl Jung, Nietzsche, Jordan Peterson, whoever else, and, you know, get tons of like commentaries and videos and whatever else. But the way that I look at these social groups is to kind of like bring things out of the mind and, you know, each other that you wouldn't otherwise. But yeah, some people are just,
But you get what I'm saying.
yeah.
One guy in the Creative Bridge group, I think, he
Oh yeah, I think I
puts
was
up,
kicked out of that one, but go ahead.
yeah, Andrew Beale, I think he is.
Yeah.
He answers questions or posts
Mm,
with actual sections from Jung that he finds.
right.
So I read a lot of Jung through him because he's very specific question that somehow came up, and he said this is what Jung said on these things.
Mm,
And yeah, I mean, if you're going to talk about Jung, you have to quote Jung. You have
yeah.
to discuss what Jung actually said,
Right.
and not you cannot discuss Jung and then
Mm,
say, yeah, Jung was great, but I don't agree on the anima and animus stuff.
yeah.
Then you can't discuss Jung.
Yeah. Yeah. It becomes like a
Because,
dogma or an ideology almost at that point.
or the shadow even. Right? You
Right.
have
Right.
to
Right.
if you're going to start discussing Jung
Mm,
or even being into Jung, you
right.
have to understand the shadow. It's
Right.
like the key thing you need to get your head around before you start.
Right. Right. Yeah. So
I
anyway,
mean, we can talk about the shadow because the Antichrist and the shadow are not dissociated concepts, right?
yeah. Yeah. Although, again, to our point earlier that whatever that the devil may be, on a psychological, literary, artistic, or religious, spiritual, mental, any kind of level, he has to be something that, like, even the Satanist, they're like, no, we're like, if you go like, look up what Satanists are about, they're not even about Satan. Most of them, they're just about like they have this certain ethic, which is like just to enjoy life a certain way, sort of like hedonism. I don't know. There's a lot of different kinds. But if you come out and just be like, I'm the big bad evil devil here to destroy everything and everybody, then everything will run away from it. So the devil is always going to be, just like cancel culture.
Devil's going to be sneaky.
Yeah, like cancel culture is parading as like, we're the savior to save you from Dr. Seuss, or we're the savior to save you from oppressive white men, and we're the savior, So, well, and that's the thing about the Antichrist. If a person doesn't know a lot about the Antichrist, and they're just going off that word, it might sound just like the devil, but the Antichrist is actually a figure who says he's Christ, but that's just masquerades as Christ, but that's an illusion, when it's really that he is the opposite, working against the principles and the spirit of what the actual Savior is about.
So you're saying that there's Christ and then there's cancel Christ, isn't it?
Cancel Christ, yeah. That might be, yeah. In terms of what we're trying to conceptualize the modern day devil, maybe it's the cancel Christ, which actually kind of makes sense. It's like a disassociative, cancel anything that it can until there's nothing left to cancel.
Dismantling culture completely.
Yeah.
And dismantling the natural hierarchy, I guess.
Right.
Which is God at the top,
right?
The Father, and the Son, Christ, at the top,
right?
And then everything that's built around.
Although it's not just that simple. It's so the hierarchy, I think of it as a double pyramid or a double triangle, in that the on top things might be what you're talking about, and then below that you might put certain values and virtues that we commonly think of as such, whether that's wisdom or courage, or those type of things. And then but the anti version is to invert that to where you think disassociation is the right thing, which disassociation might be actually that thing on the pinnacle of sort of like the evil pyramid, or the the evil hierarchy. And so it tries to invert that. And then also it's like below that might be things like beauty and money, because beauty and money, for example, they can be values and virtuous, not necessarily evil, but they're supposed to be like lower on the hierarchy. So you put things above that, like wisdom and courage, and these things that we commonly understand as virtuous. And then toward the bottom would be things like, it's fine to have money and beauty and all those things, but they're just not the highest values. But then the disassociative spirit will try to flip it over, and it works through that disassociation and the culture. And I mentioned this in the intro. Was it the one of the last couple podcasts that I put up? How that and it was sort of talking about this, the chapter that we're talking about today a little bit, is how that there is this old military strategy. Maybe it's the oldest and most used, but it's either called defeat in details or divide and conquer, and then ultimately divide and rule, which is just that it's so much easier to defeat your enemy rather than like take on, like destroy their whole kingdom at once. It's so much easier to divide them amongst themselves and divide them and pick off the little pieces of the army or the enemy or whatever.
Yeah.
So same thing internally on an individual level. The more we disassociate, the more we defeat ourselves. And then we project that out on the culture, like with cancel culture, and also just in like how divided the Western world is now, or the world at large. And like another podcast I want to do in the next couple of weeks or so is to talk about how it's really confusing what liberals and conservatives is. And again, this isn't always so overtly of a political podcast, but these kind of things are important because we live our lives by what these are, but it gets really, really confusing. And one reason too is we also just started our the book that just came out, 12 More Rules for Life, and Jordan Peterson talks about liberals and conservatives, or liberalism and conservatism, and how certain personalities gravitate toward a certain one.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know if I would call it a critique on him or just that analysis, is that that's a little bit of an oversimplification, because now the left has become more conservative in like what conservatism really means, and that they are trying to be authoritarian. They're trying to conserve a certain way, which might be their scientism and certain things, their new science of no gender, their new cancel culture. And then on the right, they're being a little bit more liberal in other ways, whether that's so they'll at least with their they're not trying to tell people how to run their lives, basically, on the right, for the most part. So it's kind of flipped. But either way, even and that's still an oversimplification, but on both sides, it's like they're going to be conservative on certain things, and then they're going to be liberal on certain things. But then ultimately, it's a matter of how much that they want to use the government to enforce whatever that they're trying to conserve or liberalize. But
right. But then you get to the question of, why is the government so big?
Right.
That the government plays such a big role in our lives that we even care who the prime minister is or the president.
Well,
that's another question. But
well, briefly, I think that's another form of this disassociative issue, which is really the devil sort of, or the devil type spirit, or the antichrist spirit sort of reaching through the sort of like archetypal levels of culture. In that, right. I was talking to a friend recently who kind of lives in a small town, and this
person. So you're saying the devil is the government? Okay.
No. That would be another conspiracy theory. Although what I'm kind of getting at does help to make sense why that people think that or say that. But I was talking to a friend. I was talking to a friend recently who lives in a small town, and this person was talking about how their family and friends are always getting in each other's business, and what I said is, that's interesting, because that's how the world always was before so much media. That was part of our disassociation of, like, every person has their own suffering, their own trauma, their own life issues, their own little things that are responsibilities, just even day-to-day responsibilities that they don't really want to think about or feel or deal with. So rather than dealing with it, they get in other people's business, just like talking shit on each other, whatever. Yeah, and that's how it was for like thousands of years, or maybe tens of thousands of years. Who knows? Actually, probably most all of human history, until the advent of so much media that we've had in the last 100 or 200 or 300 years or whatever. Anyway, so
it's amazing how much news gets generated even in a small village.
Right. And a lot of it is just crap. But anyway,
news.
yeah. But now that we have media, to the point of like the government being the devil or whatever, but what it happens is we project out onto the world of the government. We project out onto the president, the prime minister. We project out onto all these political leaders and the archetypal police.
Out?
Yeah, we just project out we just
be involved.
Well, so we don't project out like, God, I love the police, or God, the wonderful president. I mean, some people do that in weird ways, especially with Trump and things, and that's another topic, I guess. But it's like a luminous figure, almost like they do. Some people do with even AOC and some others on the left, but for the most part, it's like projecting out evil, because what happens then if you say what you're doing is people are saying there's evil in the world, which is really there's evil in every individual, but you're saying the president's evil, or the prime minister, or the archetypal, police authority is evil. So let's destroy them, when really that's helping us to not deal with that which is in ourselves that is evil or bad. And then it elevates our own identity or inflates our own ego and helps us disassociate and escape our own problems. So that's how that we project out this disassociation onto every level of society, and to where that then, just like you're talking about in your own reality wasn't making sense because of your own issues. Everyone does that, but they're just a lot more unconscious of it.
Reality wasn't making sense. Because I flew too close to the sun.
Right.
And then I also saw Satan in the conspiracies.
Yeah, what was that like? So enough of my ranting. Tell us more about seeing Satan in conspiracies and everything.
Well, my brother-in-law put me onto this Q thing.
Oh, yeah.
I was like everyone else. Like, I don't need to look into that.
Yeah.
This is not
a lot of work without reward.
This can't be important.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Like, the Q is posted in 4chan. So 4chan, do you know how it works?
Sort of, but enlighten us.
So there's 4chan, right, which is a forum where all the users are anonymous. There's a bunch of these. Every user is anonymous. You don't have to log in. Or maybe you get a code name, like a hash number. Anyway, you post as anonymous. Everyone posts anonymous. There's one user who has their own ID, avatar. It's not an avatar because it's basically text-based. And he's, or it, or whatever it's called, Q. And like 4 years ago, Q started posting in this group. And then there are a bunch of people who are anons, and they decode what he's written.
Wow.
And the thing is that the stuff that he wrote in 2017 came true in 2020.
Like what are some examples for those who are not enlightened in this area?
There's a whole timeline of the stuff that Trump was going to do, like cleanse the DOJ, cleanse the CIA, the FBI, and then the impeachment, electoral fraud, and so on and so forth. And then, stuff like this.
I could probably do that. I said I could probably do that.
People don't know what it is, right? So
yeah.
This is what it is. There's no such thing as QAnon. There's
Right.
just Q. There's Q,
Mm.
which is supposedly, and this is like far out, supposedly a quantum computer that
Okay.
is able to predict the future.
Uh,
It was like, wow. And
mm.
right.
Has Q ever been wrong?
I don't know. This Q spews out a lot of random stuff, so I don't know if it's right or wrong.
Interesting. Mm.
So, so anyway, I got into
Yeah, I
this
mean, it
idea.
almost reminds me of like Jordan Peterson will sometimes give this example of how Hitler came to power and how that in doing so, and it's almost again like one of these archetypal antichrist or devil type figures of how in coming to power, he's not just like, hey guys, I got an idea, let's kill Jews and put them in these Zyklon B camps and gas them and all the horrible things. But what he does is he just spits out a bunch of ideas into a crowd of hundreds or thousands of people or so, and then some of the ideas will just kind of like fall on them like meh, and then someone will be like, yeah, Germany, whatever, and so that's kind of like how a lot of leaders like that came to power. And it kind of reminds me of what you're talking about with this Q or QAnon thing, is if this computer slash person, whatever, is just spewing out a bunch of ideas, then there's going to be some that people will gravitate to, like, oh my God, yeah, election fraud, that makes so much sense. And then there might be some that will get kind of forgotten. Similar to like how Hitler came to power. But anyway, so yeah, keep bringing us up to speed on this. Yeah.
The point is that you don't need to go telling anyone about this. If you get into it, you don't need to tell your family and friends, right? Or go on podcasts or whatever.
Oh yeah.
It's just because they'll think you're crazy, and that's justifiable.
Yeah. Huh. So anyway, you saw the devil.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
I had to, no, it wasn't like that. It was like there was a narrative that the inauguration would be the time when they rounded up all the bad guys. So Biden and everyone else. But it didn't happen.
Oh. So when it didn't happen the way that you thought it would happen,
I was already in hospital by that point.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't know. I didn't see it not happening.
Yeah, that's interesting. It would be interesting to go back now and try to make sense of all these realities that were coming together. Like, okay, part of it too is the very real reality in America of, regardless of all of that and so many conspiracy type things, put that aside.
Yeah, let's put it aside.
Well, I mean, just for the sake of what I'm saying now, at least, is that it's regardless of all that, most people don't have faith in our election process now. And that is a tragedy that we haven't figured out yet how to deal with. One, we don't have, and it's various levels. Like, some people are sure that Biden is the devil or whatever, or something like that. Or probably more so that he's like being puppeted by some real devil antichrist type person. And then some people just don't believe in the election results and everything else. Even like myself, I think being a more I don't know, level-headed person or trying to be. Is just that like the election in 3 swing states, I think probably Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. If about 50,000 votes went the other way, then we would have had a different result on that. And also that those states were the ones that were most contested with legal issues and very real legal issues, like unconstitutionally.
And also the way the media handled it, like they refused to even.
Yeah, the media has basically come out and said that we are going to pick whoever wins elections, or at least that we can, even at these large scale levels. You know, like I forget exactly these interviews from a couple years ago saying that, you know, Google and Facebook and Twitter from 4 years ago were basically saying they were doing like experiments to see if they could manipulate little things to get more voters for this or that thing to go out and vote. And they think that they figured out how to do that in 2016. And so now in 2020, and in 2016, they were being less upfront about it. Like it was just kind of like, yeah, we're telling you that we're doing this as an experiment, but whatever. It was just a little experiment. But now in 2020, they basically said, yep, we are picking the presidents, because they just like in 2016, they were like, oh no, we're sorry that we let Donald Trump win. Like we didn't want that to happen. But now in 2000,
you hear what you're saying? What you're saying is wild conspiracy theory. If you've been saying this in like 2017 or 2018, you know, I or other people would say, no, come on, they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Like what I'm saying is what you're telling me now is pretty far out. I mean, now people accept it because
this
is just the way that
it's not a conspiracy.
It's the way that U.S. elections are.
Right, it's not a conspiracy anymore now. Because okay, it's one thing to say, there's this QAnon and there's like these pedophiles and there's these Satan worshipers and all this stuff that are calling the shots or pulling the puppet strings. That's one thing. And actually we know factually there is a certain level of that, but the where it gets tricky is to say, because of devil worshipers and pedophiles, that is how our whole world is run. When the reality is, it's always that tension of opposites of some people trying to do good, some people being evil, and every level in between. And to the conspiracy idea, we just know now that it's not that like Facebook or Google or Twitter are doing this for some devil worshiper pedophiles. It's that they're doing it for their own gains, that they are now maybe the most powerful organization in the world, like brand newly have christened themselves as the most powerful organizations in the world.
Christened, you say?
Yes. Like inaugurated themselves, breaking a bottle of champagne over their heads of they are the most powerful organizations in the world, because essentially they are, and it's been figured out and proven over and over again that even aside from the legal issues and election fraud issues, that enough people were influenced by the hiding of even just the Hunter Biden scandal, that if we would have had honest media last year, then we would now have a different president. Aside from the fraud issues, there's the media issues. Now, this isn't, again, it's not this is the tricky thing about like conspiracy things. It's easy to look at something like organizations want to be powerful and they want to seek out their own good, especially private, or publicly held organizations, because they're beholden to, legally obligated to their stockholders to get the most profit they possibly can, and that's the way to do so is pick the most the best president and the best political figures for them. That's not a conspiracy. That's just business, but that's the world we're living in, and I don't know if that like is gonna cause you to spiral down another conspiracy rabbit hole.
No, not at all.
But I think what I hope it does, though, is to help people try to get a better grip on reality, that there is these real screwed up things going on, and that we need to put those in their place in reality. But that's just business.
I had a discussion with my colleague, and he said I said there's evil, pure evil.
Right.
He said, no, I don't like that word. I prefer to say sociopaths, psychopaths.
Yeah.
People who are just conditioned to do bad things or whatever. But I think that there absolutely is evil, and
absolutely,
it's been clearly proven and shown to exist. And the problem of the church, or at least of the church fathers, is the argument that there is no evil, just the absence of good. And this is a very, very dangerous idea.
Right.
And I think Jordan Peterson has talked about this, is that if you do not recognize, you do not give the devil his due,
right,
you're going to be in very, very serious trouble. And to deny evil is to deny.
There's a lot of tricky things there, because you could say that's what leads to sociopathology or psychopathology, but sometimes it's little things that aren't in that category so much, and I think it often starts with that disassociation. And you'll like, if you look at a lot of these domestic violence situations, it's not that the husband killed his wife or beat his wife or whatever the case is. Sometimes it's the other way around or whatever, but it doesn't happen because the person was a sociopath or a psychopath necessarily. Sometimes, of course, that's the case, but a lot of times it's just like there were these little things that built up, and it's not like some big evil things, but they because they were living in different realities in their marriage or whatever domestic environment, these little things built up into, they became dragons in a dragon fight, and won, unfortunately. And that's the thing too, is sometimes they might be accusing each other of cheating or accusing each other of whatever, when really nothing's happening. They're just projecting out their own fantasies on each other. And so it's like a false reality gets projected out, and you could say it's a false reality, but then it manifests in real reality, and that sometimes a person could even lose their life over those type of things. And it's not a sociopath or a psychopathology necessarily.
My thought was I wanted to start a party. That was my idea. That was my plan.
Oh, when you were going to save the world as a...
That was how I was going to save the world, was to start a party. And I made friends with a hobo.
And he was going to help you?
He's an opera singer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so... But we didn't save the world.
Yet.
But opera is a good place to start.
It is. Well, and the best place to start saving the world is to save yourself, to save the individual. And that might be with the hobo opera singer, or it might just be with yourself, or an individual listening to us, perhaps. But
right, exactly.
Because if you do save yourself, keep yourself from going off the deep end, keep yourself from losing your mind completely, or maybe you lose it and find it again. Then as people do that on the individual level, which it can only really be done on that individual level, then that gets projected out. Just like the conversation we're having now. Right. Now we're not having some, like we could be having a pure QAnon conversation, and then that would be projecting out disassociation on the world. But instead we're having a conversation that sort of starts to bring order to the world. And so that's projecting out the the individual being more saved, I guess, or more redeemed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But to do that, you do have to look the devil in the eye, which I believe that you have done, you said.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to hear my story about me and the devil once?
Before I go, because I got to.
Oh, yeah, because I know you got to go in a minute. And okay, so I've been trying to make sense of this the last couple of years, especially as I have been trying to make more sense of my very spiritual religious past. But I had this was probably in 2003, either 2003 or 2004, but I was in I was very serious in my glossolalia or tongues or trance, like even dancing and singing by myself, prayer states on this rooftop that I would go onto on a regular basis.
On your own?
On my own, here in the middle of Orange County in California, and just do like a serious, deep, like what I thought was spiritual warfare type prayers, which to a degree it was that, and it's something to maybe get into on another podcast.
Spiritual warfare.
Yeah. Like praying against the principalities and powers of the rulers of the air and the demonic levels that there were and there are. Which again, that's another deep, interesting thing to try to make more sense of now. Yeah, and so anyway, so I'm doing this like launching off of spiritual missiles from this rooftop, basically, and what appears to me as I'm like look, and it's like this rooftop actually a place where I used to work, so I'm like it's like maybe on top of the 5th floor, and I can see like 360 degrees around me and all the mountains, which I also kind of liked it because there was like different kind of other religious temples that I could see from there and see the mountains and not I think see the ocean, but see to where the ocean was. And so anyway, so off from the what would it be, the east came this shadow figure that kind of like at least the way that I perceived it at the time flew from over the mountains almost like Superman, or the way that I kind of think of it is almost similar to like how that Neo flies around in the Matrix. Mm-hmm. And flew from over the mountains and landed on my rooftop that I was on. And so there was just like this shadow figure that then I was like, you're the devil himself, aren't you? And I just kind of felt like a confirmation in my own little heart or spirit or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then
well, was that like a weight?
What would I say?
A weight came down.
I don't know. The only way I can describe it is, I don't know, like if you imagine meeting someone that you think of as the most evil person that you might know of, like meeting Hitler in person, what that would feel like.
But did you feel threatened? Did you feel threatened?
I think I would have if I wasn't in my, to whatever degree, real or imagined prayer state. But when we're in this sort of like spiritual warfare, quote unquote, whatever you want to call it, state, we think of ourselves as things that strike fear in the devil. So, but the thing about striking fear in the devil, which is kind of the how that I imagined that or perceived this to have come about, is even if that's the case, you and you want to look him in the eye, so to speak, or whatever. You don't want to spend a lot of time with the guy, you know, with the devil. So basically, I kind of like said like, hey, you're here. That's interesting, but you got to go, and like you got to get out of this town. Basically, is how that I confronted the situation, and I kind of walked more towards this shadow figure on the other side of this rooftop. And then basically he flew away. And so that was that in the physical realm that I perceived is, yeah, shadow figure showed up and shadow figure flew away after a couple minutes. Wow. So, yeah. And so I don't know if that is the some kind of a manifestation of a reality or a psychic sort of reality or psychological reality. Although it seemed completely real at the time, I'm still trying to find out more about that. That's why, you know, I had on, and I had other experiences too, like casting out devils from at least one or two people around that same time. And I talked about that on some other podcast, and I had on that, what was it called, that bishop or whatever, although I'm not sure about his authenticity. But who was that anyway? So that's basically that. And so that gets into our issues of what the devil is, and that true evil and true devil is inside every single person, however that operates, and it's not always going to come out.
I mean, the collective, the devil in society,
right,
if that's a real thing and it's spreading, let's say, or coming back or whatever, then we're in serious trouble, or we will be, or we could be, because if we don't have Christ to counteract it in our culture, then we have a problem. But now I've got to go.
Okay. So we'll do this again sometime in the next few weeks, and maybe we'll get more in depth into this chapter and everything. And yeah, we may have a serious problem, and we'll talk about it again next time. And again, I appreciate you recording this and being very transparent. Any closing thoughts before you actually finally go for real?
I also appreciate you listening to my somewhat crazy thoughts. But if we're going to talk about the devil, then we have to go all in, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll go more in detail next time.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, and we'll see you around. And I know you're in Budapest, so it's later there. And good night where you're
bedtime
at.
For me.
All right, bedtime, sweet dreams. Don't have any bad dreams. All right. Take care. Bye.
Yeah.